Salams and welcome to part 12 to the Dimensions of Islam by the roving ambassador Mawlana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui al-Qadiri rahmatullahi alayhi, and my thanks to Sheikh Abdul Al-Hadi al-Qadiri Radawi, president of the Imam Ahmad Rida Academy. And we're going through this one, and he's given me permission to go through these books. And there's two volumes. Please contact the Imam Ahmad Rida Academy in Durban, South Africa, to get copies of these magnificent 2 volumes and to get your children to read it. It must be part of the school curriculum as well, right? So let's continue. And this we are listening to the speech of Mawlana Siddiqui in Tokyo on this cultivation of science by Muslims. The remarks of Draper are also worth quoting let's continue from where we ended off in the last video. So, what we call science arose in Europe as a result of a new spirit of inquiry, of new methods of investigation, and this is referred to the scientific method. So today, scientists refer to it as the scientific method, is the art and science of observation, which is clearly stated in the Quran. And this is what the European civilization had found and what they acknowledged. What we call science arose in Europe as a result of a new spirit of inquiry, of new methods of investigation, of the method of experiment, observation, measurement, of the development of mathematics in a form unknown to the Greeks. That spirit and these methods were introduced into the European world by the Arabs. The remarks of Draper are also worth quoting in this connection, and Draper observes, and I quote, "The essential characteristic of the Arabs' method are experiment and observation. Geometry and mathematical sciences they looked upon as instruments of reasoning. In their numerous writings on mechanics, hydrostatics, optics, it is interesting to remark that the solution of a problem is always obtained by performing an experimental observation." And that is the basis of the scientific method, right? If you see something, you have a question, you gather some data, you form a hypothesis, then you got to test the hypothesis. You then start doing a lot of experiments. You collect the empirical data, then you verify the data. And if it's not right, you do the experiments again. Observation, experiment, collecting data, empirical data. It must be precise. There must be no hocus pocus. There must be no superstition. There must be no pseudoscience. There must be no junk science. It must be precision. And the Muslims taught us about precision and exactness, because the Quran is a book of precision and logic and rational thinking. It takes superstition and it throws it away, because the Quran says it takes falsehood and it throws it away. Truth comes and it takes falsehood and it smashes his head against the wall. So superstition is falsehood, and Islam tells us we must be rational beings, we must use our intellect, this great gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And here we are seeing the wonderful lecture by Mawlana Siddiqui as to how the Arabs inspired the Muslim. When we say Arabs here, we are referring to the Muslims. So let's continue again with the remarks of Draper. The remarks of Draper are also worth quoting in this connection. He observes, "The essential characteristic of the Arab method are experiment and observation. Geometry and mathematical sciences they looked upon as instruments of reasoning. In their numerous writings on mechanics, hydrostatics, and optics, it is interesting to remark that the solution of a problem is always obtained by performing an experimental observation. It was this that made them the originators of chemistry, that led them to the invention of all kinds of apparatus for distillation, sublimation, fusion, filtration, and so on, that in astronomy caused them to appeal to divided instruments as quadrants and astrolabes, and in chemistry to employ the balance, the theory of which they were perfectly familiar with, to construct tables of scientific gravities and astronomical tables as those of Baghdad, of Spain, of Samarkand, that produced a great improvement in geometry, trigonometry, the invention of algebra, and the adoption of the Indian numeration in arithmetic. Such were the results of their preference of the inductive methods, their declining the reveries of Plato." End of quote. And Mawlana Siddiqui goes on in his lecture. "The repeated appeal of the Quran to observe and study the phenomena of nature and the laws working therein was responsible for creating a taste for physics among the Muslims. They acquired the knowledge of the ancient physicists. They corrected their views and made epoch-making contributions to the subject. At the height of its power, the Muslim world produced thousands of physicists like Al-Kindi, Ibn Sina, who is also known as Avicenna in the West, Abdul Rahman Sufi, Al-Bayruni, Umar ibn al-Khaldun, Yaqub ibn al-Tariq, Muslima al-Maghribi, Ibn Rushd with Averroes, and Hassan ibn al-Haytham al-Hazan, and Ibn al-Yunus, the famous inventor of the pendulum and the measurement of time by its oscillations. I might briefly touch here upon the work of one of them, which is al-Hazan, to give an idea of the genius of Muslim physicists. And Mawlana Siddiqui continues. Hassan ibn al-Haytham, commonly called al-Hazan, and famous for the discovery of atmospheric refraction, says Right Honorable Sayyid Amir Ali, flourished about the end of... So this is a quotation by Right Honorable Sayyid Amir Ali. So he says, Hassan ibn al-Haytham, commonly called al-Hazam, and famous for the discovery of atmospheric refraction, flourished about the end of the 11th century and was a distinguished astronomer and optician. He was born in Spain but resided chiefly in Egypt. He is best known in Europe by his works on optics, one of which has been translated into Latin by Reisner. He corrected the Greek misconception as to the nature of vision and demonstrated for the first time that the rays of light come from the external objects to the eye and do not issue from the eye and impinge on external things. He determined the retina as the seat of vision and proved that the impressions made upon it were conveyed along the optic nerves to the brain. Subhanallah, look at that, absolutely amazing. He explained the phenomena of a single vision by the formation of visual images on symmetrical portion of the two retinas. He discovered that the refraction of light varies with the density of the atmosphere, and that atmospheric density again varies with the height. He explained accurately and clearly how, in consequence of this refraction, astral bodies are seen before they have actually risen and after they have set, and demonstrated that the beautiful phenomenon of twilight was due to the effect of atmospheric refraction combined with the reflecting action of the air upon the cause of the rays of light. This is all observation. Look how they've seen. They were looking at how the sun is setting, how it's rising, all to do with observation. You observe and you think and you ponder. Right, let's continue with this. In his book called The Balance of Wisdom, he discusses dynamical principles generally supposed to be the monopoly of modern science. He describes minutely the connection between the weight of the atmosphere and its density, and how material objects vary in a rare and in a dense atmosphere. He discusses the submergence of floating bodies and the force with which they rise to the surface when immersed in light or heavy media. He fully understands the principle of gravitation and recognizes gravity as a force. He knows correctly the relation between the velocities, space and time of falling bodies, and has very distinct ideas of capillary attraction. Absolutely amazing, subhanAllah. Right. So Mawlana Siddiqui continues as well, where he says, the Quranic exhortation to study the composition of matter led the Muslims to the cultivation of chemistry and gave them the proud position of the father of that science. So the Muslims are basically the fathers or the foundations of so many fields within optics, astronomy, botany, and now we are looking at chemistry. Join me in the next episode, which will be episode number 13, as we continue with this magnificent lecture by Mawlana Siddiqui in Tokyo, in Japan. Stay well, look after yourself. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Aleem.